Namaskar, good morning, good afternoon, good
Good
evening.
morning.
Whichever part of the world you may be, I am addressing the viewers also now. My name is Ramdas Vallathol. I am a nephew of the poet laureate Mahakavi Vallathol. There is always a dilemma that which language we should use when we conduct a webinar on Mahakavi Vallathol, because all his great works he has done in his mother tongue, Malayalam. So the logical choice will be Malayalam to use in the webinar. But on the other hand, Mahakavi Vallathol's vision was always global and his messages were universal. So on that way, his personality cannot be restricted to linguistic boundaries or national boundaries. Even today, I got a mail from director French embassy saying that he will forward our program details to his network. That means it's increasingly becoming global, our webinar. And moreover, we have a guest from France, Annette Lede. Probably she speaks better Malayalam than us. But still, in her network also, there are a lot of French nationals. So that's why I would prefer to speak in English today. So the first episode in the Vallathol Memorial web series was on Mohiniyattam, which is already available on YouTube. Today we are going to conduct the webinar on Kathakali. Kathakali, as we all know, it is arguably the most colorful story dance theatre art form in the world. There is a saying in Malayalam, Katha ariyade aadaruthu. So what it means is that without knowing the actual details of a subject, we should not act or we should not talk. But we will be enlightened more about Kathakali by all experts in the webinar today. But before I start introducing one by one the members, I would like to thank the legendary actor in Malayalam, Padma Bhushan Mohanlal, for sending us a very short and sweet audio message in which he has touched on all the aspects. He has touched on Mahakavi Vallathol, his role in establishing Kalamandalam, he has touched on Kathakali, and he has also given suggestions as to how to popularize Kathakali among the young generation. So Mohanlalji, if you're watching this video, on behalf of the family, namaskar. Thank you very much for your support. In such a short audio, you have touched the soul of Kathakali and you have touched the hearts of the viewers who will be watching this video on YouTube. And also I would like to thank the famous producer, Sunesh Kumar. He has been in the film industry for the past 40 years. He has produced many famous films. He has helped me a lot to get this audio from Mohanlal. And also my friend of 30 years, Ajit Abdullah, who actually connected me to Suresh to get this audio.
നമസ്കാരം. മോഹൻലാൽ. അച്ഛൻ്റെ ഒപ്പം കഥകളി കാണാൻ കുട്ടിക്കാലത്ത് പോകുമ്പോൾ ഞാൻ കരുതിയിരുന്നില്ല ഒരിക്കൽ ആ കിരീടം തലയിൽ വിൽക്കേണ്ടി വരുമെന്ന്, ഉടുത്ത് കെട്ടി അരങ്ങിൽ വരേണ്ടി വരുമെന്ന്. ഒരു തവണയല്ല, 2 പ്രാവശ്യം കഥകളി നടനായി ഞാൻ സിനിമയിൽ അഭിനയിച്ചു. രംഗം, വാനപ്രസ്ഥം എന്നീ സിനിമകളിൽ. അതൊരു മുജ്ജന്മ സുഹൃതമായി ഞാൻ കരുതുന്നു. കളിയച്ഛൻ എന്ന കവിത എഴുതിയത് മഹാകവി കുഞ്ഞിരാമൻ നായരാണെങ്കിലും മലയാളത്തിൻ്റെ യഥാർത്ഥ കളിയച്ഛൻ മഹാകവി വള്ളത്തോളാണ്. കഥകളിയെ കേരളത്തിൻ്റെ ആത്മമുദ്ര പതിച്ച കലാരൂപമായി ലോകത്തിന് മുമ്പിൽ അവതരിപ്പിക്കാൻ കേരള കലാമണ്ഡലത്തിലൂടെ അദ്ദേഹത്തിന് സാധിച്ചു. അങ്ങനെ സംഭവിച്ചില്ലായിരുന്നെങ്കിൽ കഥകളി കേരളത്തിൽ മാത്രം ഒതുങ്ങിപ്പോവുമായിരുന്നു. മഹാകവിക്ക് എൻ്റെ പ്രണാമം. കഥകളിയെക്കുറിച്ചോ അതിൻ്റെ സാങ്കേതികതയെക്കുറിച്ചോ ആധികാരികമായി പറയാൻ ഞാൻ ആളല്ല. അല്പം പോലും പാണ്ഡിത്യം ഈ വിഷയത്തിൽ എനിക്കില്ല. എന്നാൽ എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്ന ഒരു കാര്യം മാത്രം പറയാം. കഥകളിയെ ജനകീയവത്കരിക്കുക എന്ന കാര്യത്തിലാണത്. സിനിമ പോലെയോ അതുപോലുള്ള കലാരൂപങ്ങളെപ്പോലെയോ കഥകളിയെ ജനകീയവത്കരിക്കാൻ സാധിക്കില്ല എന്നാണ് എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നത്. അങ്ങനെ ചെയ്യാനും പാടില്ല. അതിസൂക്ഷ്മമായ മുദ്രകളോടെ, മുഖഭാവങ്ങളിലൂടെ സംവേദനം സാധ്യമാവുന്ന കഥകളി വലിയ ആൾക്കൂട്ടത്തിന് വേണ്ടി ചിട്ടപ്പെടുത്തിയതാണ് എന്നെനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നില്ല. കലാ ആസ്വാദനത്തിൻ്റെ അതിസൂക്ഷ്മമായ അടരുകളെപ്പറ്റിപ്പോലും അറിവുള്ള ആസ്വാദകനെയാണ് കഥകളി എന്നും തേടുന്നത്. ഏറ്റവും അടുത്തിരിക്കുന്ന സദസ്സിനോടാണ് കഥകളി വേഷങ്ങൾ സംവേദിക്കുന്നത്. അത്തരത്തിൽ ഒരു സൂക്ഷ്മ കലാരൂപമായി തന്നെ കഥകളി നിൽക്കട്ടെ. ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റുന്നൊരു കാര്യം പുതിയ തലമുറയ്ക്ക് കഥകളിയിൽ താല്പര്യമുണ്ടാക്കുക എന്നതാണ്. അത് വളരെ പ്രധാനമാണ്. ഏറ്റവും ആധുനികമായ മെത്തഡോളജികളിൽ ജീവിക്കുന്ന പുത്തൻ തലമുറയിലേക്ക് ഈ മൗന മുദ്ര ഭാവ കലാരൂപം എങ്ങനെ സന്നിവേശിപ്പിക്കാം എന്ന കാര്യത്തിലാണ് ആലോചന വേണ്ടത് എന്ന് തോന്നുന്നു. അത് വളരെ ആഴത്തിലും വിവിധ മേഖലകളിലെ വിദഗ്ധരുടെ ആലോചനകളുടെ അടിസ്ഥാനത്തിലുമായിരിക്കണം ചെയ്യേണ്ടത്. അത്തരത്തിലുള്ള ഏത് ശ്രമത്തിനും എൻ്റെ പിന്തുണയുണ്ടാകും എന്ന് ആത്മാർത്ഥമായി അറിയിക്കുന്നു. എന്നെ ഇത്തരം ഒരു സംഭാഷണത്തിന് ക്ഷണിച്ച മഹാകവി വള്ളത്തോളിൻ്റെ കുടുംബത്തോട് എൻ്റെ കൃതജ്ഞത, എൻ്റെ പ്രാർത്ഥന, എൻ്റെ സ്നേഹം ഞാൻ പങ്കുവയ്ക്കുന്നു. സ്നേഹപൂർവ്വം, മോഹൻലാൽ.
Now it is my pleasure to formally introduce each member in the chronological order of presentation. I would like to introduce Sri B. Kaladharan. He is a prolific writer and art critic, contributing articles to all reputed newspapers and publications in both Malayalam and English. He was Deputy Registrar of Kerala for a long period. He has extensively toured Europe, US and other Asian countries in connection with cultural events. His topic for today's webinar is Vallathol and Kalamandalam. Welcome, Sri Kaladharan ji. Welcome to the webinar. Okay. Now I would like to introduce Annette Lidé. She is a graduate of the Institute of Eastern Languages in Paris. Her passion for dance theatre, Kathakali, goes back to the 1970s. Kathakali was a melting pot for her three passions. And those three passions were India, dance, and the theatre. She studied at Kalamandalam and Sadanam Institute for a long period. After 10 years of deep study, she established the Annette Lidé Company. Among the many productions was a very experimental Kathakali version of Shakespeare's King Lear. Her topic for today is Kathakali, a Western perspective. She is joining us from France. Welcome, Annette, to today's webinar. Welcome. Now, Dr. Sadanam Harikumar is a versatile artist with huge talents in various fields. He is a grandson of Kaka Karnavapuram, one of the founders of Kerala Kalamandalam. He has worked as a professor in Kathakali at Vishwabharati University, Shantiniketan in Calcutta. Later, he joined Sadanam and became its principal. Over a decade, he has also been making Kathakali costumes. He is also an accomplished Carnatic musician and has performed on many reputed stages. His topic for the day is experimentation in Kathakali. Welcome, Dr. Dr. Retumanur P. Kannan, besides being a Kathakali performer and researcher, he is a mind awareness and management trainer. Currently, he is director of SNA Kudiyattam Kendra at Thiruvananthapuram. He is a visiting artist at York University, campus director at Kalamandalam, visiting faculty at National School of Drama, New Delhi, and also instructor at Center for Intercultural Performances, University of California, Los Angeles. His topic for the day is Kathakali, how to make Kathakali more popular among the masses. Welcome, Dr. Kannan. Welcome. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce and welcome Sri Madan K. Menon. He is a grandson of Mahakavi Vallathol, and he is a heart and soul of Kozhikode Kathakali Club. That club has been running brilliantly for the past 15 years with his brilliant leadership. He has been the secretary of Kathakali Kozhikode Club for 15 years. Now let me introduce my cousin Vallathol Nandakumar. He is an active member of Vallathol family and firmly believes in inculcating bonding relationship in the present generation through activities. By profession, he served corporate world for over 28 years in reputed company Addison Malayalam in a very senior position and have widely traveled the world. He is an ardent disciple of Sadhguru Sri Rama Devi. Welcome. Now let's start the webinar in earnest. I would like to invite Sri Kaladharan to present his papers. Sri Kaladharan, the board is in your court now. Please present your paper.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Good evening to all. At the very outset, I should speak a little about the socio-cultural situation in Kerala in the beginning of the 20th century. The early decades of the 20th century, there is a wide held belief that the art forms of Kerala were on the brink of degeneration. In fact, if you just look at the period between 20 and 30, you can see that there were many talented artists in the field, and there were many number of performances, Kathakali performances, and there was no dearth of artists or stages as well. But then, what prompted Vallathol to set up an institution like Kerala Kalamandalam? What motivated him? I think it was mainly the fear. There was a fear in the society, especially in the Central Kerala regions, that Kathakali and other art forms would soon perish. They would be on the brink of extinction. There are many reasons for that. It could be the slow breaking down of the joint family system, then the breakdown of the feudal system, and also the English-educated people began to distance themselves from their own art forms and their own culture. So all these created a kind of fear in the minds of the people, and of course, Vallathol also became concerned about it. So that's the reason why Vallathol and his close associate Mukunda Raja, they put their heads together and they actually made a plan what to do with the setting up of an institution to save these traditional arts from extinction, especially Kathakali. Because as you know, Vallathol was so fond of Kathakali, his father was also a great admirer of Kathakali as well as Mohiniyattam. So Vallathol inherited all these from his father. Then, of course, we also know about the trials and tribulations Vallathol underwent in establishing this institution, because the question of bringing an art form which had so far been under the feudal patronage to the public sphere, democratizing an art form like Kathakali was no mean task. And Vallathol had punishing schedules, in fact. He was a multifaceted genius, as you know, and Kathakali was not his primary concern. He was into so many different things, especially as a poet, and as one who was very much involved with the national movement. And he was also dealing with Ayurveda and a lot more different subjects. So Kathakali was only one of his concerns. But still, Vallathol thought that that Kathakali should be saved from extinction, and that's why he, along with Mukunda Raja and several well-wishers, they strive to set up this institution called Kerala Kalamandalam, and that was a lofty dream fulfilled when it was established. It was the first, the Kathakali school of Kalamandalam was in the house of Kakad Garnavapad in Kunnangulam, and which was later shifted to Srinivasa Bungalow of Mukunda Raja. And in 1938, Kerala Kalamandalam came over to Cheruduruthi along the banks of the river Nila, as you all know. And you can see that Vallathol the kind of efforts he made to establish this institution, all the painstaking efforts he took, that we all know. But apart from that, as a poet, as a person who is passionately involved with this art form, he intervened in the aesthetics of Kathakali too. So we could see that he went into the galleries and he advised the students, he gave advice to the teachers, except of course to Patikanduru Ravanaman, who did not listen to him because of some other reasons. Otherwise, Vallathol was also involved in the aesthetics of Kathakali. So in that way, what he did for the upliftment of Kathakali, for the resurrection of Kathakali, especially during a period when it was thought to be on the brink of extinction, is something unimaginable. The kind of task he took and the way he achieved all this, and his organizational skills and his aesthetic involvement and his interventions in each and every activity of the institution. Apart from that, he was also very keen on reviving Mohiniyattam. Mohiniyattam as a dance tradition had almost become extinct by the time Vallathol founded Kerala Kalamandalam. So he experienced so much of strain, and he underwent so much of tribulations to find out a teacher for coming over to Kalamandalam and giving lessons to students of Mohiniyattam. It was not that much difficult for him to find out a teacher compared to getting a student for learning Mohiniyattam. That itself was a great task. And finally, he was able to find out a teacher and one student, and Mohiniyattam Kalari began at Kalamandalam. And if you just go to the records, to the newspapers, the news that came when Vallathol was in his effort to bring Mohiniyattam to Kerala Kalamandalam, you could see so much of criticisms he faced. And Sanjayan was one of the great literary figure during that time. He was the one who came down heavily on Vallathol. And he thought that Vallathol is trying to revive something as part of the Dasiyattam. And he wanted to, Vallathol actually wanted to revive something that doesn't have the backing of history, that doesn't have the backing of reasoning. But Vallathol did not mind. He had so much of conviction that against all the odds, he could see that Mohiniyattam, whatever available, by the time Vallathol appointed the teachers of Mohiniyattam at Kerala Kalamandalam, there was not much left in terms of its aesthetics, in terms of its history, but whatever available, he restored at the Kerala Kalamandalam. This also becomes one of the most valuable contributions of Vallathol to Kerala's traditional art forms and with the setting up of Kerala Kalamandalam. And one thing which I noticed is that Vallathol transcended regionalism. He was very much in favor of the grammar of Kathakali preserved by the Kallivadi School, and which was very much a phenomenon in central Kerala during those days. But at the same time, Vallathol thought that much more than the accuracy of the Ankika Abhinaya and all those involved in terms of the techniques, you also want to have an emotional appeal to Kathakali. So that's why Vallathol invited Kunjakurupu, Tagadi Kunjakurupu, to Kerala Kalamandalam. So he actually wanted to see a Kathakali which does have the grammar, also the emotional element of it. Emotional element in the sense that it should be able to communicate the emotions of the characters in full measure. And for which you need great actors also from outside the region. That's how Kunjakurup came to Kerala Kalamandalam. So in this way, Vallathol could see that all the immensely talented artists could come together at the Kerala Kalamandalam, and they could lift the name up and to make it a global phenomenon. And that eventually happened. And Vallathol had terrible apprehension when he took Kalamandalam, Kathakali and Mohiniyattam troops to various cities within India and outside. He didn't know that whether it would be appreciated or not, but somehow by the 40s or so, and so many Western artists and art lovers, they started coming to Kalamandalam. They started enjoying, they showed a kind of very definite interest in Kathakali and also a little for Mohiniyattam too, but mostly for Kathakali. So that also became a great inspiration for Vallathol to see that these art forms are to be preserved at any cost. And so many people did not listen to what he said, but many souls, there were many noble souls who helped Vallathol a lot in the preservation and promotion of Kathakali and Mohiniyattam through Kerala Kalamandalam. And I should also mention here that since the passing of Vallathol in 1958, he was chairman of the institution from 1930 to 1958. At the age of 79 or so, he passed away. That was in 1958. Since then, and we don't know whether Kalamandalam had to become a university or so. I heard some people afterwards speaking about Kalamandalam as the dream of Vallathol to be converted into a university. I don't know whether Vallathol had such an ambition. Anyway, he had a very deep, intimate bond with Tagore, and he knew Rukmini Devi Arundel very well. And he, of course, wanted to see that Kathakali and other classical art forms of Kerala attain a global fame, a global acclaim. He actually dreamt. But other than that, whether he wanted this institution to become a university, I do have my reservations. But anyway, one can see that Vallathol actually wanted Kalamandalam to become the center of the classical, not only the classical performing arts of Kerala, but also to see that the people realize the value of tradition. The society has to retrieve the values of tradition so that they just don't become imitators of the West. They don't blindly ape the West. But other than that, the people should recognize their own culture, their own values, and they should go in for that, and they should develop a kind of self-confidence out of it. This is also part of the nationalism which Vallathol and others, in which Vallathol and others took part. So I think since the time of Vallathol, there were many people who came to Kalamandalam. They became the authorities of the institution for 5 years or 3 years, but none of them had the vision. None of them had the charisma which Vallathol had. They all contributed their might to the development of Kerala Kalamandalam, but I could not see anybody who can be considered equal to Vallathol in terms of his conviction, in terms of his optimism and his determination, and all the qualities associated with a charismatic leader. And I think Vallathol's name as a poet, of course, of the trios Kumaranashan and Ullur, along with them, Vallathol's name is long remembered in the literary history of Kerala. But along with that, or on a par with that, Vallathol will be remembered as the one who retrieved the tremendous values of our traditional performing arts by establishing this institution called Kerala Kalamandalam, which to a certain extent withstood the test of time. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Sri Kaladharan Ji, for taking us back in time and explaining how Vallathorma developed, resurrected Kathakali. Thank you once again. Now, it's my pleasure to invite Annette Lene to present her topic.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you all for inviting me to this webinar. It's a first experience for me, and I'm very honored to be part of this distinguished panel. I was first introduced to Kathakali by Mrs. Milena Salvini, who was one of the earliest foreign students, I believe, in the 60s. Who was allowed to study at Kalamandalam. And later on, she played a really crucial role in promoting both Kathakali and Kalamandalam, as well as Kudiyatam later on in all this. So she has been a very important link between Kalamandalam and the rest of the world. So after learning from her for a while, I received a scholarship from the Indo-French Cultural Exchange Program, and I came to India and Kerala particularly to learn Kathakali. I first spent a few years at Gandhi Seva Sadanam. That's where I did most of my learning of Kathakali. The main teacher there was Raman Kutiyashan. And then, fortunately, Kirpadam Kumar Nayak came over to Sadanam to teach, to be the main teacher there. So it was a real privilege for me. I must also say that Sadanam Harikumar, who was then one of the senior students at Sadanam, was tremendous help for me as a link to understand, to sort of try to fathom this huge universe that Kathakali was. He has been extremely generous, and I thank him again for that. And after that, later, after finishing my time at Sadanam, I spent one season at Kalamandalam in the Kalari of Padmanabhan Ashram. That also was a real privilege. Later on, I came back to France, and I had understood my role to be also a sort of link between France and India, and Kerala particularly. And I could not see myself organize a career only for myself. I wanted to do things that would associate Kathakali and Kathakali artists to what I was going to do for the rest of my artistic career. So I had long conversations with my husband, and he told me, he said, "Yeah, well, just go for the best. And you just try and adapt Shakespeare's King Lear to Kathakali, because these two arts are huge art forms, Shakespeare, Kathakali, and King Lear is the most suitable play for that." So we started working on that together, and we came back to Kalamandalam actually, and went to expose the project to Padmanabhan Ashram, hoping that he would allow some of the students of Kalamandalam to take part in the project. You know, we were just starting. And so we explained what the project was and what the story was, what the whole thing was. Kilimangalam Vasudevan Namboodiripad was extremely helpful at that point also, because he was a sort of mediator between us and Ashan. And Ashan asked a lot of questions, and little by little I thought, oh, he seems to be really interested by this story and this character. And at the end of the conversation, I said, I dared say, "Ashan, would you consider being the King Lear yourself?" He said, "No, Kate." And the next morning, he said, "Okay." And from then on, the whole project took a real dimension, I don't know how to say in English. And the whole Kalamandalam got interested in the project. Kaladharan was there also. He was also a link between us and the administration and all the complexity of the project. And we ended up having a beautiful team of artists, including, of course, Padmanabhan Ashram, and also Kirpadam Kumar and Nayar Ashan, whom I really wanted to be part of this thing. Both of them performed the role of King Lear in turn for some time. And we had people we had Gopi Ashan, we had Madam B. Ashan, we had the two Poduvals. I mean, it was just an extraordinary team. We went on tour for 3 months with this team, which was quite an experience. Not easy at times, but memorable. I must say, memorable. There were people like, of course, Chenda Unnikrishnan, and some youngsters like Unnikrishnan Nayar, Kalamandalam Manoj, and younger people who were so helpful and fantastic. So this was my really big connection with Kalamandalam. And this production toured all over the world for a period of about 10 years. We had different teams. We had a number of big artists who took part at some point or another, Krishan Ashan, Leo Dashan. I mean, I cannot name them all, but they're all on my mind and my memory. And this whole thing was started in the Kutambalam at Kalamandalam, also in the old Kalamandalam for some time. And we then had this tour, we had those performances, and we finished this series in London at the Shakespeare's Globe Theatre in London. After that, it was more or less over. But 30 years later, meaning last 2018 and 2019, we decided to revive this production, and we invited a new team, but composed also of the basic youngsters who had taken part in the first production, like Sadanam Basi, Unnikrishnan Nayar, Manoj Kumar, Sadanam Manikandam, Sadanam Krishnadas, who is no more, unfortunately. And they all took part in this new production. We had a new King Lear, Mr. Pishapilli Rajiv, who did a fantastic job on this character. And we had, for the first time, we had an extensive tour of the play in India. The first version had not been performed much in India for some reason, for many reasons. And this second production toured over India. It was a great pleasure for me to be able to show this. It was very close to the first production with slight changes only. So Kathakali King Lear has provoked a lot of controversies over the years, especially because we introduced some innovations, not much, because we were very keen on keeping the spirit of Kathakali and the traditional aspect of it. That is the reason why we had Padmanabha Ashan and all the great Ashans, and the whole project was totally discussed with them, and all the decisions were made collectively. You had to have good arguments to get some of the decisions we made, of course, but eventually everybody sort of agreed. So King Lear was a unique experience, I must say. Later on, I went on doing other sort of productions always with involving Kathakali artists. Well, this was one of my big points in my artistic career, which has now gone for about 30 years. I was very clear that I would always have Kathakali artists associated with my works. This was very important for me. So basically, the Basi, Manikandan, Manoj Kumar, Unnikrishnan Nayar, and Krishnadas, whom I always call Kandan, took part in those different productions. So I don't know if I should go any further in the King Lear experience itself, but it was a way for me to discover new territories, and it was a way for me to be still faithful to my French creative tendency and to the Kathakali world, which for me was very important. It was very important to respect it. So we took some liberties with Kathakali, and we took some liberties with Shakespeare as well. I mean, this is the whole process of adaptation, isn't it? So there were losses, there were gains, but this is always thing with adaptations, of course. So what else could I say? I think I would like to thank all those who have allowed me to do this long journey with Kathakali, and I still feel that Kathakali is completely part of me and of my life and of my creative journey. India has been, Indian artists and Indian arts have been a big part of my life and still are. Of course, at the moment, it's a very difficult situation because we are away from each other due to the present situation. But I very much hope that sooner or later we'll be able to get back together and continue the journey. I want to thank everybody, and I especially want to thank the French authorities, also the Institut Français, the French Embassy, the Alliance Française network, who have always supported my work and my different propositions, which were not obvious for everybody. And also now, at some point, the Kerala government also supported, especially for the reconstruction of Kathakali King Lear last 2 years. And so I've been very blessed, and I wish you all the best, and I thank you all for having me with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Annette, for taking us back to the nostalgic days when you created the Kathakali version of King Lear. And may I maybe ask you, what sparked the interest in you? You must have been in Kalamattal in the 80s, isn't it? Many, many years ago.
84.
84, when you were a young lady full of life. What sparked the interest in you to come to a place like Kerala from France? How did you come to know that there is a place like Kerala, there is a Kalamandalam, there is a unique art form like Kathakali in Kerala?
Yeah. As I was saying, it's Milena Salvini who had created a center in France called the Mandapa Center. And I was a student in Indian literature and Tamil, which I don't speak. But I was a student in the Oriental Languages Institute in Paris. So, and I was also in theater myself. I was acting in theater, in French theater. And so all this came together. And when I first saw Kathakali, I thought, well, that's it. Because in that, there is theater, there is culture, there is language, there is art, and there is dance. And I was also very much interested in dance. So for me, it was a very complete and total art. That's what brought me to it. And Kerala, well, you know, Kerala, I discovered little by little. The first time I came to Kerala was 1975. And I came back again and again and again. And I lived, but mostly I didn't spend much time at Kalamandalam. Mostly I spent time at Gandhi Seva Sadanam in the old school of Sadanam, down there near the river. That's where I really spent a lot of time. And that's where it was a really very formative time and very, very difficult. Kathakali is really tough, especially for a French lady, yes.
Okay, and was it usually this kind of human endeavor like music, art, it is passed on?
Sorry, it's not clear.
Okay.
Sorry, can you repeat? It was not clear.
Usually, this kind of activities like art, theater, music, it's passed on hereditary through genes. Did anybody in your family have similar interest in theater, drama?
Well, my mother never did it, but she dreamt of being a theater actress when she was a child, but she never could. So maybe it comes from that. I don't know.
Okay, usually here if you take any leading artist, 80% of them have either the mother, the father, or the grandfather in the same.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. But I'm not a leading artist. I'm just a tool. Thank you.
But you are a great bridge between Kerala and France. Thank you.
I tried. I have tried.